Motley Crüe has had a great run. I'm touring until I cannot move anymore. And then, after that, when they bury me, I'm still going to have a Motley Crüe record playing up a tube about Tommy would dig me up and use my bones for drumsticks.
Mick, who is Mick Mars. Mars, the guitarist who helped build the legendary monument that is Mötley Crüe, with his emotionally charged playing, chilling riffs, and extraordinary endurance, became the silent musical soul of the band. Born with ankylosing spondylitis, Mick Mars didn't walk with proud, effortless steps. He walked with silent endurance and a rare, unyielding perseverance. Early life, when Mötley Crüe exploded with sold-out tours and anthems that shook the world, few realized that the man standing quietly at the corner of the stage was battling excruciating pain with every passing second. 40 years of dedication to a world-renowned band, only to leave in bitterness and lawsuits. A musician who devoted his entire life to the cause, only to be pushed aside by the very brothers he once stood beside. What turned Mick Mars, the once vital musical soul of Mötley Crüe, into a forgotten shadow? And what gave him the strength to rise, to forge a new path of his own after all the betrayal? Let's dive into the story of Mick Mars. Early life. Mick Mars, born Robert Allen Deal, was born on May 4th, 1951, in Terre Haute, Indiana, into a poor working-class family. His parents, Tina and Frank Deal, moved the entire family to Garden Grove, California, when he was still young, hoping to find a better life. In that cramped house, Mars grew up alongside four siblings in an environment that was far from stable. From an early age, Mars was different. At just 3 years old, his parents took him to a small local fair performance. The image of country singer Skeeter Bond with his guitar shimmering under the lights left an indelible mark on the young boy's mind. When they returned home, Mars firmly declared, "This will be my life." At the age of 12, his parents gifted him his first guitar, a cheap instrument. But for Mars, it meant everything. While other kids were busy with sports and parties, Mars spent hours teaching himself to play, following along to every record by Elvis Presley and surf rock artists like Dick Dale. But at the same time, his body began showing strange signs. At 14, Mars started feeling sharp pains at the base of his spine, something he couldn't explain and didn't dare to share. His teenage years were spent going to school with a small frame, a slightly hunched back, and a mind consumed by music. He joined the Jades, an amateur band covering the Beatles, starting on bass before quickly switching to lead guitar. From school concerts to late nights in seedy bars, Mars honed his craft dollar by dollar. The price of his dream was steep. At just over 18, he suffered a serious hand injury in a factory accident, an accident that almost ended his musical career before it had even begun. But Mars chose a different path. He quit his job, dropped out of school, and turned away from a safe life to pursue the only thing he truly believed in, the guitar. Meanwhile, his illness progressed silently. The pain grew more intense, but Mars continued to stand on the stages of rundown bars, his face twisted in agony, yet his hands still gliding over every note. At an age when many were just stepping out of youthful dreams, Mick Mars already understood his musical career wouldn't be a game. It would be a battle. A frail boy, injured hands, a body slowly giving out day by day. Yet he refused to leave the world he had chosen. What kept Mick Mars from letting go, even when everything seemed to turn against him? Early career. The early years of Mick Mars's career were a long string of failures and challenges. After leaving his manual labor job, Mars joined small bar bands across Southern California, playing blues rock in dingy bars where the pay barely covered a single meal. One of the most notable bands during this period was White Horse, a group that helped Mars build a reputation in the underground rock scene of Los Angeles with his energetic guitar style, note-for-note riff replication, and emotionally charged improvised solos. Mars quickly drew attention. At that time, some even mentioned his name alongside another rising guitarist in the city, Eddie Van Halen. However, commercial ambition killed the dream when White Horse decided to shift toward disco to follow the trend. Mars immediately walked away. He knew well he wasn't born to chase market tastes. He needed something fiercer, something more real. In the years that followed, Mars played with several pop groups, releasing a few unsuccessful singles before realizing that he needed a complete change. He shaved off his signature mustache, dyed his hair jet black, and transformed himself into a colder, more aggressive figure. Most importantly, he officially changed his name from Robert Allen Deal to Mick Mars, marking a total rebirth of both his music and his identity. In April 1980, Mars posted an ad in the recycling newspaper. Loud, rude, aggressive guitarists available. Just days later, Nikki Sixx and Tommy Lee, two young ambitious musicians, reached out to him. They were immediately struck by Mars' cold demeanor, razor-sharp gaze, and crushingly heavy riffs. It was Mars who also suggested the name Mötley Crüe, recalling an old comment someone once made about White Horse being a motley-looking crew. That name, along with a ferocious sound and rebellious image, quickly became iconic. During those first rehearsals, when Mars' guitar roared to life, the other members realized they had found a missing piece, and it was irreplaceable. Mars wasn't just a guitarist. He was a musical engine, the anchor that held together a band that was about to explode in ways even they couldn't have predicted. A man in his early 30s, limping from spinal pain, standing among three 20-somethings hungry for glory, would have the strength not just to keep up but to lead them to the top? Success with Motley Crüe. Motley Crue's career took off almost immediately after their formation in 1981. During a time when heavy metal bands were crowding the Sunset Strip, Motley Crüe stood out with their raw sound, rebellious image, and defiant attitude. But few mentioned the truth. It was Mick Mars's thick, cold guitar tone that gave the band much of its musical weight. During those formative years, their debut album Too Fast for Love, 1981, initially self-released, bore Mars' imprint. Simple yet catchy riffs, powerful hooks that underpin the band's wild but instinctive style. With this album, Motley Crüe quickly built a loyal fan base and signed with Elektra Records in 1982. The true breakthrough came with Shout at the Devil in 1983. Mars developed a heavier, darker sound, blending traditional hard rock with the ferocity of heavy metal. Tracks like Looks That Kill and Too Young to Fall in Love clearly showcase his ability to craft riffs that could dominate a stage with just a few simple notes. Between 1985 and 1987, Motley Crüe reached their commercial peak. Theater of Pain, 1985, featured the hit Home Sweet Home, a ballad driven by Mars' restrained riffs and brooding guitar layers. Girls, 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 1987, pushed the band's bad boy image to its extreme. Here, Mars' playing was dirty, gritty, and heavily blues-influenced, especially on tracks like Wild Side and You're All I Need. By 1989, Dr. Feelgood was released, the band's most successful album, topping the Billboard 200. Under production of Bob Rock, Crue's sound became tighter. Mars showcased the pinnacle of his technique and emotion on songs like Kickstart My Heart and Without You, combining raw power with smooth, heartfelt solos. Throughout it all, Mick Mars wasn't just playing guitar. He was a musical foundation of Motley Crüe, holding the band's sound together even as the other members spiraled into drugs, alcohol, and media scandals. In interviews, Nikki Sixx and Tommy Lee were often the center of attention. Vince Neil was the face of the band. But it was Mick Mars who transformed their chaos into living, breathing music, both on stage and in the studio. Illness. Meanwhile, ankylosing spondylitis continued to ravage his body. Mars grew more hunched every year, moved slower after every tour, while his bandmates partied into the night. He quietly returned to his hotel room, battling pain that lasted until morning. A little-known truth, Mick Mars rarely participated in Motley Crue's wild escapades. He was the only member who stayed clear of major scandals, but because of that, the gap between him and the rest of the band grew ever wider. Success came like a storm, but for Mick Mars, those years were a double battle, one for his career and one for his very existence. Illness, pain, and loneliness. As Motley Crüe climbed higher on the charts, Mick Mars's body went in the opposite direction. At 17, he was diagnosed with ankylosing spondylitis, a chronic form of arthritis that gradually fuses the spine. It began with dull backaches, then sleepless nights, mornings where simply standing up took everything he had. The disease not only restricted his movement, but slowly deformed his body, causing Mars to hunch over and shrink nearly 7 centimeters from his original height. Yet Mars never spoke about the pain. On stage, When the lights came on, he stood there, head bowed low, clutching his guitar as if it were a replacement spine for the body that was quietly falling apart. Every tour was a true battle. Long flights, back-to-back shows, endless hours on a tour bus. Each was a nightmare for a man whose spine was collapsing vertebra by vertebra. But Mars rarely complained. Instead, he endured in silence, hiding the pain behind a hardened exterior. Unlike his bandmates who drowned themselves in alcohol, drugs, and endless parties, Mars lived quietly. He wasn't close to Vince Neil. He wasn't bonded with Tommy Lee. He shared little with Nikki Sixx beyond the music. For more than 2 decades, Mick Mars was essentially a solitary figure within the very band he helped build. In the autobiography The Dirt, Mars admitted he had fallen into severe depression. At one point, he drank heavily to numb the pain, eventually becoming dependent on opioid painkillers. There was even a night when, drunk and desperate, Mars walked into the ocean intending to end it all, only to wake up soaked and freezing, wondering whether he was still alive or already a ghost. In the 1990s, his illness eventually forced him to undergo hip replacement surgery. The pain subsided, but the loneliness remained. Mick Mars was the only member not chased by the media, not plastered on magazine covers. To the public, he was the odd one, the quiet man, the shadow of Mötley Crüe, even though it was his guitar that truly kept the band so alive. A battle that lasted more than 40 years. Fighting disease, fighting loneliness, fighting to be heard without ever once surrendering. Betrayal and legal battle. In 2022, after more than 4 decades of battling alongside his band and against a devastating illness, Mick Mars made a difficult decision to withdraw from touring because his health could no longer endure it. But he made it clear he was not quitting the band and he was ready to record, perform at stationary events, and participate in any activities that didn't require extensive travel. Just 24 hours later, Motley Crüe announced to the press that Mars had retired and would be replaced by John 5. No discussion, no negotiation, just a cold announcement. Mick Mars understood he had been pushed out, and this time, he chose not to stay silent. In early 2023, Mars filed a lawsuit against the band in Los Angeles Superior Court. He accused his former bandmates, Nikki Sixx, Vince Neil, and Tommy Lee, of conspiring to remove him from his business interests, forcing him to sell his 25% ownership stake in the company that controls the Mötley Crüe brand at a lowball price. Mars also demanded full access to the band's financial records, which he alleged had been deliberately concealed for years. The revelations in the lawsuit were explosive. Mars accused Nikki Sixx of not actually playing bass live during the tour, with all bass tracks pre-recorded. He also claimed that many of Vince Neil's vocals and Tommy Lee's drums relied on backing tracks. Mars alleged that Sixx abused his influence, downplayed Mars's abilities, and spearheaded the effort to declare him unfit to perform in order to seize his stake. It wasn't just about financial betrayal. Mars also faced personal humiliation. He was mocked for his age, for his health condition, even for his private relationships. The place he once called his musical family had now become the force trying to erase his very existence. The band fired back, claiming that under previous agreements, any member who withdrew from touring forfeited their share of touring revenues and related activities. They argued that Mars no longer qualified to remain. But for Mars, it wasn't just about the money, it was about dignity. It was about the right to be recognized for a legacy he had sacrificed his health and his life to build. After months of legal battles, a partial victory leaned in Mars's favor. The court ordered Mötley Crüe to pay his legal fees for delaying the release of documents and affirmed his right to access the band's business records up to 2022. While the legal fight has yet to fully conclude, Mick Mars made one thing clear. He will not stay silent and let what he deserves be taken away. Even if he stands alone, even if he is abandoned, he will keep fighting, just as he has fought his entire life. Rebirth with a solo career. Leaving Mötley Crüe was not the end for Mick Mars. It was the beginning of the most important chapter of his career, rewriting his own life story. Shortly after the lawsuit with Crue erupted, Mars quietly retreated into his private studio in Nashville. No longer burdened by image, commercial expectations, or market trends, he decided to do something he hadn't been able to accomplish in over 40 years. A pure Mars solo album, undiluted and uncensored. The album, titled The Other Side of Mars, was officially released on February 23, 2024. From the title alone, Mars sent a clear message. This was a side of him the public had never seen before. The album took nearly 4 years to complete, with Mars personally involved in every stage, from songwriting to arrangement to hand-picking his collaborators. He brought in trusted friends and colleagues. Paul Taylor, former keyboardist for Winger and Alice Cooper, co-wrote several tracks and played a key role in shaping the musical structure. Jacob Bunton, former member of LAMB and Adler, handled most of the lead vocals, bringing a fresh yet deeply emotional voice to the project. Additionally, the album featured Ray Luzier, drummer for Korn, on several tracks, adding power to the rhythm section. Produced by Michael Wagoner, the same man who had worked with Mötley Crüe during the Too Fast for Love era, the album retained a raw, unpolished spirit free from excessive gloss. Musically, The Other Side of Mars did not follow the old hair metal formula. Mars blended hard rock, blues rock, and touches of modern industrial elements. Songs like Loyal to the Lie and Right Side of Wrong demonstrated that his riff-writing ability remained as sharp as ever, heavy cold, but still deeply emotional. Ballads like Memories revealed another side, a Mick Mars filled with reflection, maturity, and hard-earned wisdom. Throughout the album, Mars' guitar tone was unmistakable, thick, dark, and profoundly deep. His solos didn't showcase flashy technicality. They focused purely on raw emotion, something Mars had always valued more than speed or showmanship. In rare interviews, Mick Mars stated plainly, "I'm not trying to sound like anyone else. I don't have anything to prove. I just want to play the way I want to, honestly, without apologies." The album received strong praise from rock critics, many calling it one of the most authentic works a veteran artist has released this decade. With The Other Side of Mars, Mick Mars achieved what he had never been able to during all his years in Mötley Crüe, telling his own story, fully controlling his music and his destiny. No longer forced to hide in anyone's shadow, no longer bearing the pain in silence, Mick Mars at last stepped into the light entirely on his own terms. Personal life. Mick Mars' life offstage was never as loud as the music he played. It was quiet, complicated, and filled with empty spaces that were not easily mended. Personal life. At a very young age, before Mötley Crüe even formed, Mars married his teenage sweetheart Sharon Deal. Together they had 2 children, Les Paul Deal, named after the legendary guitar innovator, and Stormy Deal, who would later inherit her father's battle with ankylosing spondylitis. But the hard years of playing in cheap bars, coupled with the crushing weight of financial pressure, pushed the first marriage to its breaking point. As Mötley Crüe began to take shape, Sharon left Mars, taking their children with her, leaving him alone to struggle with music and unpaid child support debts. At one point, if the police pulled him over, Mick Mars could be immediately jailed for unpaid child support. Friends from that era recalled having come up with tricks and loopholes just to help him avoid arrest between tour stops. During those chaotic years, Mars also fathered another son, Eric Deal, through a brief relationship with Marshall Martel, a singer from a local band. However, Mick's absence during Eric's early years created gaps that would prove difficult to bridge. As Mötley Crüe soared to fame in the 1980s, Mars' personal life remained just as unstable. In 1990, he married a second time to Emmy Cannon, a backing vocalist who had toured with the band. But this marriage also collapsed after just 4 years amid internal band turmoil, and as Mars sank deeper into both physical and emotional pain. Both marriages left him with more than just financial losses. They left fragments of memories, children he could not be close to, homes he could not hold on to. It wasn't until 2007, after more than half his life had passed, that Mars found a different kind of anchor. Serena Schonenberger, a Swiss model more than 3 decades his junior. They met after a show in Zurich. Serena, then just 22, was drawn to Mars's quiet but intense presence, a nearly 60-year-old man whose eyes still burned brightly behind dark sunglasses. In 2013, they married, and for the first time Mick Mars had someone by his side, not for fame, not for money, but simply for who he was. They live a discreet life in Nashville, away from the media, far from the old wounds of show business. There, Mars writes music, records, and takes quiet walks with his young wife. Sometimes with a cane, sometimes just with a thoughtful smile. His relationship with his children remains marked by distance. Les Paul, the eldest son, maintains a closer bond, following his father's musical footsteps. Meanwhile, Stormy and Eric have chosen quieter lives, keeping a certain distance from their father. In a rare interview, when asked about what he regrets most, Mick Mars answered simply, "I missed out on too many things that I can never get back. There are losses that don't make noise. There are wounds that cannot be measured by money or success." Beneath the cold exterior, Mick Mars' personal life is a series of silent collapses, and also a testament to the quiet strength of a man who chose to stand back up every time without a word. Current life and legacy. Stepping into 2024, Mick Mars marked a new milestone in his career. On February 23, 2024, he released The Other Side of Mars, his first ever solo album through his own label, 1313 LLC, in collaboration with MRI. This was a fully independent musical project marking Mars' true return after his departure from Mötley Crüe. The album quickly received positive feedback from critics and fans alike, with standout tracks like Loyal to the Lie, Undone, and Right Side of Wrong. In terms of style, The Other Side of Mars retained Mars' signature guitar tone, thick, cold, and deeply emotional, while embracing a more modern spirit. No longer confined to old formulas, Mars freely blended traditional hard rock with modern elements, showcasing a strong evolution in his musical thinking. Despite his age, he proved that his creative fire was far from extinguished. Not stopping there, in 2025, Mick Mars confirmed that he had already begun work on his second solo album. He revealed that the new project will be a step forward from his debut, featuring a broader, more ambitious sound. To achieve this, Mars partnered with engineer Chris Collier, renowned for crafting recordings that are modern while still preserving the raw soul of the artist. Today, Mick Mars lives quietly with his wife Serena Schonenberger in Nashville, far from the noise of the entertainment industry. He spends most of his time writing, recording, and focusing on his health, continuing to create in silence without the need for stage lights. Although he's been through legal battles with Motley Crüe, Mars has not entirely closed the door to potential future collaborations, but his main priority now is his solo career, a journey where, for the first time, he is truly in control. As for his legacy, Mick Mars has left behind more than heavy riffs and emotionally charged solos. He was instrumental in shaping the sound of Mötley Crüe, keeping the band anchored to its musical identity through its most turbulent years. His influence stretches from the hair metal bands of the 1980s to the hard rock artists of later generations. Above all, the story of Mars is a story of resilience, an artist who triumphed over disease, aging, and betrayal to keep playing, to keep living on his own terms. Mick Mars was never the face of Mötley Crüe. He wasn't the one holding the microphone nor the one whipping the crowd into a frenzy. But it was he, with his cold, relentless guitar, who kept the band anchored with a true musical soul for over 4 decades. At an age when many have long since stepped away from the spotlight, Mars continues to write, to play, and to walk forward on legs seemingly worn down by illness, without the need for applause, without asking for pity. He quietly leaves his mark on his own path, a journey where honesty and steadfastness are never compromised. The life of Mick Mars stands as a simple yet powerful testament. You don't have to be loud to make a difference. Sometimes it is silence, perseverance, and loyalty to oneself that leave the most lasting impression. Have you ever quietly fought for something you believed in, just as Mick Mars has done all his life? If so, share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss more real-life stories as inspiring as this one.